still out there in San Francisco. When are you coming home?
Coming home on Sunday.
Coming home on Sunday. Adam tells me he forgot to bring a hat because he thought he'd only be out there for a few days. Big mistake.
Yeah, it sucks. I have to shower before shows and stuff now.
Just rock the hood. Throw your hood up, man. That
Yeah.
won't look weird. I actually did. I did that. We did the early bird when I forgot that we were. See, look at that, ridiculous. When I forgot that we were doing actual faces on it, I just
Yeah,
rocked
yeah.
a whole podcast like that and totally forgot. So, yeah, some freakish hermit in a basement is what it looked like. But anyway,
Yeah.
we're glad to have you with us. We've got 10 games today. Adam, I'd mentioned to you before the show started, you could go a number of different ways on this slate, whether you want to go where you want to go balanced, like 7, 8, 9K guys across the board, really good balance. Whether you want to get up to, Jokic, LeBron James is really expensive. We'll get into him. But I don't think, a lot of nights where there's a very specific build that, most of the field goes to, like not just chalk players, but a chalk build. I don't see that being the case nearly as much today.
Yeah, and at least as of right now, questionable value too. I mean, you have Len and McGee, obviously, but outside of them, there's pretty suspect value plays. And whenever you have a slate where there's only a couple guys that everyone's going to use for their value, it obviously only takes a couple of guys to bust. And that lineup build is kind of dead. So, I'm with you. I think there's a lot of different ways you can approach this one.
All right, well, let's jump right into it then. We shall start with a 7 p.m. game, Miami at Charlotte. The Charlotte Hornets are favored by 3.5 points, 216 total. This is the lowest total on the slate, and by a pretty wide margin, right? Every game is at least at 224 or higher. This is at 216. Two slower paced teams, not exactly exciting teams in their own right, but maybe we can dig into it a little bit. Before we ran the updated ownership, and we'll let you know when we do. I'm going to check to see if it's updated. Looks like
It updated a couple minutes ago.
6 minutes ago. Beautiful. So we got an update 6 minutes ago. Lamb earlier in the day, in the first iteration of these ownership projections, was projected to be the third highest owned player on FanDuel or DraftKings. He's down to 26%. That's the third highest, but he's been playing really well. He's playing a lot of minutes off the bench, 27% of those with Kemba Walker off the floor. What's your take on Jeremy Lamb coming into this game at 5,200 against the Heat?
Yeah, I mean, it's site dependent here. He's 6,800 on FanDuel, so I don't have any interest there.
Big difference. Yeah.
Yeah, but 5,200 on DraftKings, I think you kind of have to be interested. I don't like the matchup against Miami. It is a slow-paced game, like you said, but you're talking about a guy with a 24.5% usage rate, playing big minutes off the bench. Anytime he gets without Kemba is obviously appealing as well. So I kind of have to have interest, especially because he is shooting guard, small forward eligible. So he's not there's a ton of point guards in his price range on DraftKings. But the fact that he's eligible at different positions makes it appealing too.
Yo, our boy CLA935, one of our premium members in Slack, brings up a very good point. He said, yo, Adam, there's no place that sells hats in San Francisco?
I mean, I'm not that worried about it. It's one of those things, I don't really think about it until I'm getting ready to do a show, and then I'm not going to get a hat. But
listen here, pal.
yeah.
If Adam hasn't bought a modem yet, he certainly isn't shelling out $26 for a hat. All right. What about the rest of Charlotte? You're going to think I'm crazy, and maybe I am. But if you're looking at a lot of the value plays are going to be pretty chalky. All right, check this out. You probably know where I'm going, and it's ugly, but Frank Kaminsky's played 24 and 28 minutes over his last two games, 25 and 26 fantasy points respectively. He's never been a terrible per minute producer. I mean, he's at a fantasy point per minute on the season. How many minutes do you have Kaminsky getting today? Because last game and the game before that, Cody Zeller played 21 and 24 minutes. Kaminsky in those same games played 28 and 24 minutes, while Michael Kidd-Gilchrist was a DNP-CD. What are your thoughts here? So is Hernan Gomez, by the way, has been.
Yeah, I have Kaminsky at 22 minutes. That definitely could be low, but even that is going to get him into enough lineups where I don't feel like I need a lot more. Um, I'm scared with the minutes just because we have seen pretty volatile rotations for Charlotte all season long, and he really hasn't been in the rotation all season long. So it's tough for me to just throw him into 26 minutes or something like that. But at 3,200 without much value on the slate and with power forward eligibility, I certainly think he's a perfectly fine value option.
Yeah, I don't think it's the craziest idea. James Borrego's pulled the floor out from underneath Kaminsky and Hernan Gomez and Biombo and Zeller. Really, all of these guys. I mean, think of this. If Zeller can go from playing 34, 37, 35 minutes a night to 24 and 21, it can certainly happen to Kaminsky, and he can play 12. But
Yep.
if he does play 24, 26 minutes, he's not a terrible value play. But look, you run the same risk. I mean, Dirk Nowitzki had been playing 22, 23 minutes, 25 minutes, 4 straight games, and then, played 19, blowout loss. By the way, he had a really terrible game that last time out. He shot 13 times, though. Dirk,
Nowitzki?
go ahead.
No, I'm talking about Dirk.
Yeah, I honestly thought he just didn't shoot at all. I just saw he shot 13 times, just only made 2 of them. But
Yeah.
anyway, I'll try and stay on track here, and we only have till 6 p.m. until we turn it over to the live before lock crew. Is there anything else that stands out to you for Charlotte? And if you want to tie Miami into it, that's fine. I did not get much Miami today at all.
I have nothing for Miami. On DraftKings, the $8,300 price tag on Kemba, I think is fine. There's a lot of value at point guard as far low mid-range value in that $5,300 range. And I think I'll probably get to a pretty good amount of that. So it's not like Kemba, and you have D'Angelo Russell, you have a lot of options here. So it's not like Kemba's going to be one of my highest owned guys, but I do think that at 8,300, there's certainly some upside for him.
Okay. And then Miami, again, I don't have much. You don't have much, if anything, right?
Right.
All right. Let's talk. And we have 10 games. We want to be able to touch on all of the games that we like most. So that'll help you more than talking about a Miami team that we have no interest in. This game I do like. Washington and Dallas. Wizards 5.5 point favorites at home. 233 total. I mentioned this to you earlier today, and it surprised me. Since the trade deadline, right? Since they made those wholesale changes to their personnel, the Wizards are averaging 105.5 possessions per 48. That's a lot. That is a lot. And it's third in basketball over that stretch. Almost a month now. Granted, the All-Star break worked in there as well. But it definitely makes a difference. You've got guys like Luka at 9,100 on DraftKings, 9,300 on FanDuel, coming off 2 blowout losses where his minutes were curtailed because they got crushed. There's actually a decent amount in this game that I like. Some of them might just be tournament flyers, but guys like Doncic are really hard to avoid at that price.
Yeah, I love Luka here. It would kind of surprise me more if he doesn't triple double than if he does. It's just such a good matchup for him. A fast-paced game or a fast-paced team in Washington, but also they've been really bad at defending against threes. They don't offer much in the way of rim protection. They don't rebound well. It's just so many different ways for Luka to put up big stats here. So I absolutely love Luka. I really like the price tag. Both sites, I like him a lot. And then Dwight Powell also, especially on DraftKings at 58 or 5,900, but also at 68 on FanDuel. His minutes, he's lost minutes in a couple of blowouts, but in the last 2 competitive games that Dallas played, he played 37 minutes apiece. He's facing a Washington team that doesn't rebound well, and he should be able to post monster numbers against them. So I think that Powell's a really strong play here as well.
Me too. There's still, as I like to say, some meat left on the bone. Powell had those last 2 games not been blown out. You're looking at 37 minutes again.
Right.
He'd have closed them out around 37 minutes. He's a fantasy point per minute player at 5,900. Yeah, absolutely. You like him more on DraftKings than FanDuel, right?
Yeah, I like him on both, but on FanDuel, he does have the appeal of being a power forward instead of a center, which is
right.
nice.
But power forward's very deep today.
Is it?
I mean, at the top, there are quite a bit of power forward.
Yeah. At the top, you're right.
Yeah, and then you obviously have Larry Nance as well at 5,600. So,
Yeah.
um,
So yeah, I do like him more on DraftKings.
so do I. I'll throw this out there just because I can. Uh, Tim Hardaway Jr. Look, the guy is not a very exciting play. He's 4,800. He had been playing 35 minutes until these blowouts. One of them, he got in a little early foul trouble. I would expect him to get back to normal playing time tonight. He has almost a 25% usage rate since he's come to Dallas. We'll say since the All-Star break. I think that's when I ran it. He hasn't been great, but he's still a guy that's going to go out there and get up shots in a pace-up matchup against a pretty rough Washington defense. Washington, since the deadline, is still 22nd in defensive rating, third in pace. So I don't think Hardaway is the craziest option here at 4,800. Anything else on Dallas you want to touch on?
Not that I'm getting to with, or that I expect to get to with much frequency. I mean, Jalen Brunson and Dirk are both cheap and in good enough spots where I don't think they're crazy, but the Doncic and Powell are easily the priorities for me here.
All right. What about Washington? Bobby Portis at the 5. You're getting about 28 minutes a game from him. He 1.17 fantasy points per minute since coming to Washington. He's played pretty well, especially when given elevated run. You have Bradley Beal, whose price tag has skyrocketed, 98 DraftKings, 10-5 on FanDuel, but he's played really well. And then aside from that, you're looking at guys like Trevor Ariza, who on the first wave of ownership projections, Ariza's ownership was projected to be very high, still is. Quite a bit higher than I would have initially suspected. Let's talk about the Wizards here, Adam.
Yeah, so I mean, Beal, the price tag, like you said, has really gone up. I still think that in a vacuum, he's fine. He's still sub 10K and he's playing like 40 minutes in competitive games, and he is basically their entire offense. So I think it's fine. It's just that it's difficult for me to pay more for Bradley Beal than for Luka. You have DeRozan at the position for less against Atlanta. You have a lot of ways you can go that don't involve spending a ton of money on Bradley Beal. So from a roster construction standpoint, maybe kind of becomes a casualty. But whatever Beal I get, I'm perfectly fine with. You mentioned Ariza, who the minutes are nice, the matchup's fine. I think probably more appealing on FanDuel, since small forward's not a particularly good position. He's only 6,100 there, so he's priced very similarly to DraftKings. And then Satoransky on DraftKings at 5,200. There's one guard in that range that I like more, but
Rondo.
Satoransky at that point. No, well, yeah, but I meant like 52, 53, 5,400.
Oh, okay.
Derek White, but I do think Satoransky is a good play. Should get around 32 minutes here.
Agreed. Yeah, I don't have an issue with him either. I'll throw this out there too. You're probably going to get reasonably high ownership on guys like Gordon Hayward and Mikal Bridges today on FanDuel specifically, where the position's not very deep. Believe it or not, LeBron's ownership right now is pretty low, and it makes sense because he's 12-7. If you're looking at Hayward, who had a strong game last time, very good game last night, but had a total of 77 fantasy points in 5 previous games, he's had more bad games than good, right? And I'm not saying not to play him. We'll get there. Also, guys like Mikal Bridges, who gives you 20, 25 a night. Jeff Green is not any riskier than those guys. So I think you have to throw him into the same bin as the Haywards and the Bridges tonight, Adam. He's pretty much the same risk, same price, and also a pretty good matchup.
Yeah, I agree with that.
But there's not much you can say that's exciting about him. Anything else you want to hit on here, Bobby Portis?
Not really. I mean, whatever you end up with from these front court guys is fine. Just make sure that you set rules so that you don't get Portis and Thomas Bryant together. That's not something you want. Minimize how much Ariza and Green and Parker you have, just because they also cannibalize each other's minutes.
That is the case. All right, let's talk Detroit and Minnesota, making good pace here. Unless there's anything else in that last game you want to talk about. I think we touched on it all. And I will just say, as good as Bradley Beal's been, the top of shooting guard has a lot of really appealing players. I mean, a lot. And you don't have to like all of these, but just to name a few: DeRozan against Atlanta, Booker against the Knicks, Mitchell against Utah, Russell on DraftKings, not particularly high on him, but he is 7,900 against Cleveland. Zach LaVine against Philly. There's a lot here, Adam. So, if you're paying for Beal, that does mean that you are passing up likely one of those guys and paying the extra 1,800 or 2,000 for them, which to me, I don't know if that's necessary tonight, even though Beal has been outstanding.
Yeah, that's where I'm at. If you just ask me if you can play Bradley Beal at 9,800 or whatever, the answer is yes. But when you start factoring in the opportunity cost of all these other players, it becomes pretty suboptimal.
Sure. All right, Detroit, Minnesota. Let's keep this moving. We've got Minnesota on the road. They are actually 5-point dogs here, 223.5 total. This is the second lowest total on the slate. Then they all pretty much just shoot through the roof. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them above 230. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 of them above 226. This isn't terrible though. This 224 total doesn't really sway my opinion one way or the other. We will start with the Pistons. Blake Griffin on FanDuel specifically, Adam. He's right now projected to have the highest ownership on FanDuel, and he is only $8,500. He's $300 cheaper than Lauri Markkanen, $300 more expensive than LaMarcus Aldridge, and then Andre Drummond on FanDuel is coming in at 10,000 flat. On DraftKings, you're getting Drummond at 9K flat. Let's first talk about this Detroit front court, which is really the only thing that matters most night for the Pistons.
Yeah, and the price tags are really appealing, especially on DraftKings where Drummond is 9K, so you have him, $1,000 less than FanDuel. I like him quite a bit there. I like Blake on either site. The issue with Blake is, like you said, there are a ton of options around him. So if he is projected to be the highest owned out of the group, I think that amongst, all my tournament lineups, there's a pretty good chance that I'll end up like around the field on Griffin and then being able to get overweight on some of the players in that price range that maybe people are passing up. So I do like Blake. He really never should be 8,500 on FanDuel. 8,600 on DraftKings is really nice as well. And then Drummond, much more in play for me on DraftKings than FanDuel.
Yes, absolutely. Did you ran crunches? What did you come up with?
No, I didn't.
You didn't yet. Okay, sorry. No. I was going to ask where you came up on Drummond, because I definitely like him. I don't know how much I like him. Now, if we just take a quick look at ownership projections, on FanDuel, he's coming in around fourth. Now, I think these are going to be very scattered outside of if the non-Alex Len lineups, maybe the non-McGee lineups, assuming he starts. I think they're going to be very scattered, and I'll tell you why later. But right now, you have guys like Drummond and Jokic and a bunch of others that really have lower expected ownership than I would have anticipated, which is why I use this. So it's interesting to me. Jokic, Drummond, Powell, Aldridge, this is DraftKings specifically, Markkanen, Griffin, Portis, Love, they're all coming in right around that 12 to 15% range, which is pretty interesting. Do you see the need to take a stand on any of them, or kind of just work them all in?
Yeah, I plan on kind of just working them all in. If in our final update, if we were to get, using Blake as an example, if we were to get Blake suddenly at like 25%, and taking some of the ownership away from guys like Aldridge and Markkanen, then, I think that I would want to be overweight on like Aldridge, Markkanen, and then around the field on Blake. But if they are going to be very similarly owned, I'm fine, just kind of being overweight on the entire group.
That's exactly what I was getting at as well. And it's not that hard to do. Obviously some value coming up at the position that we'll discuss shortly, but I think it's easy to get overweight on a good amount of these guys, especially on DraftKings where, many of them are power forward eligible. You can play technically 4 centers if you want, depending on who has eligibility at power forward. So that's that's big to me, especially on a night like this. Do you have any interest in anything else outside of this front court? I can tell you I don't, so I'll let you close out Detroit.
Not particularly.
Okay.
I think Reggie Jackson's fine, but I just have like 6 guards around him that I like more.
Yeah, I'll pass on Reggie.
Yeah.
Like I said, if Ish Smith's out, give me some Reggie. If Ish Smith's in, I'm good. Even though I think they played next to each other last game a little bit, but not that.
Yeah, we hadn't seen that in a while.
I know it's still not enough for me to change my opinion much. Karl Anthony Towns last night, very strong game, 41 and 14. That was Josh's guy. Props to Josh. Good call there. Meanwhile, Vooch could not have played worse against Amir Johnson. We were right about Justin Patton playing, by the way. Justin Patton got some minutes, and Mike Scott. And Vooch just basically did not show up to play. So that sucked. But I can't say I didn't expect it. Anyway, Towns tonight, you have to scroll to get to where his ownership is at. And I don't think it's crazy. I actually don't, because he's 11-5 on FanDuel. He's 10-8 on DraftKings. He can produce against any matchup, but this is a supersized front court that isn't a pushover matchup. And center has a lot of really good options, as it usually does, Adam. Where are you at on Karl Anthony Towns tonight?
Yeah, I think he's kind of just going to be a casualty of the slate for me because, you don't have to pay up at this position. There's a lot of, mid-range or kind of upper mid-range options below the top price point or top price tier. But then also you have Jokic against the Lakers, who I have projected for like 4 points more than Towns. So whatever percentage of my lineups I'm able to allocate to paying up at center, I think is just going to go to Jokic, and I'm fine with that.
Yep, me too. And that was actually a question we got in chat earlier today. It was a good question. It was like, what are your thoughts on Towns at 4%? He was projected to have around 4% ownership. At the time, Jokic was only around like 7 or 8%. That's different now. But Jokic is still only around 13%. So I'm not, it's not enough. I just absolutely love Jokic in this spot. But hey, we've seen Towns do this at low ownership, and happens quite often, especially when you have a lot of other high-priced players. So I would talk nobody off of Towns. Just personally, as you said, casualty of the slate seems like that's probably where we'll end up. Matter of fact, Adam, that's pretty much where I'm at on all of this Minnesota team, including Jeff Teague. Even though he's coming off a very strong game, he's not overpriced. If you wanted to play him on DraftKings at 5,300, I totally understand. FanDuel, it's not terrible, but again, casualty of the players placed and priced around him that makes it difficult to like Teague for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Teague is fine, but just looking at the other point guards around him on DraftKings, where he's 5,300, you have Rondo at 6K, which obviously I really like. You have Derek White, you have Ricky Rubio, you have Elfrid Payton at 5,400, you have Satoransky at 5,200, you have Dinwiddie at 5,300. Like, these are all guys that I have ahead of Jeff Teague in that price range.
Do you have anything else from Minnesota?
No.
Neither do I. All right. Let's talk about Brooklyn and Cleveland. The Brooklyn Nets, imagine this, 9.5 point favorites, okay? 9.5 points. The Brooklyn Nets, pretty amazing. Pretty amazing. And right now, they are 33 and 33. They are 7th in the Eastern Conference. Unless there's some type of catastrophic meltdown, they're going to make the playoffs, Adam, and they'll probably make it as a 7 seed. Meanwhile, the LA Lakers are 30 and 34, and LeBron's set to miss the playoffs for the first time in almost a decade and a half. Basketball is definitely changing. The Brooklyn Nets have not been bad. Dinwiddie had a great game last time out. 1.5 fantasy points per minute. Only played 20 minutes, though. Lost run in the blowout. That's what we say a lot about the 6-man situation. They lose the most minutes because they don't enter till late in the third and generally don't play the fourth. But if you took his first and second rotation, he was actually on pace to play around 28, which I would have been perfectly okay with. Karis LeVert decided that he would, come back to life. He had a decent game. And, D'Angelo Russell in his 22 minutes was also solid. But that doesn't negate the fact that there still are a lot of bodies here, and we need to talk about that.
Yeah, I think that it's a tough team to be really confident in the minutes for anyone on any given night. But at the same time, in this matchup against Cleveland, there is some value to be had here because points are going to come from somewhere for the Nets. And you have, pretty inexpensive price tags on guys. You have Alan Crabb, who started the last game. You have him, at 3,600 on FanDuel, which is pretty nice. 3,400 on DraftKings, also, pretty appealing. Harris is cheap. Dinwiddie, you mentioned, is inexpensive on DraftKings at 5,300, and I think would have played 26, 27 minutes if that game had stayed competitive. One thing that I did notice from the last game, and again, we've seen this rotation change on a night-to-night basis, so it's not necessarily going to be the case, but Rondé Hollis-Jefferson was back out of the rotation outside of garbage time. So all of the center minutes while the game was competitive were split between Allen and Davis, which we hadn't seen in a few games prior. Jared Allen at 4,700, in that same, pretty cheap price range where if you're going to get 26, 27 minutes from him here, I think that he's actually a pretty decent tournament play that should come at low ownership. But also, if Ed Davis is going to get all of the backup center minutes, then suddenly you have, a $3,200 point plus per minute guy that no one's going to roster. On FanDuel, he's a power forward, so you can, punt there and still keep your center position. Not anything I would trust in cash games, but I think it's two of the more interesting ways that you can kind of get creative in tournaments.
Look, I don't disagree. What I will say, though, is I'm just 10-game slate. There might not be a ton of value. I'm probably going to be avoiding the role players, the secondary options for this Brooklyn team tonight. That's just pretty much where I'm coming in at least in terms of, any legitimate exposure. I don't mind Dinwiddie. You said probably 26, 27. I think I said 28, but still, we know he would have played more minutes than that and much more. Like, I think he probably would have played 8 minutes in the fourth quarter if that game was close, but they just blew the doors off Dallas, beat him by almost 40 points. So I don't mind Dinwiddie. Russell, to me, you want to talk about a casualty. DraftKings, I do get it. I understand it. But I'm still having trouble getting there when he's so closely priced to about 5 other guards that I really like at the 2 and at the 1. Yeah, I'm actually let's turn to the Cleveland side and talk about the front court. Ante Žižić and Tristan Thompson remain out. Larry Nance played 32 minutes last game, and the game prior to that he played 26, but that was a monster blowout. 19 the game before that, but he fouled out. I mean, I'm projecting Larry Nance for 32 minutes again tonight. Adam, wouldn't be surprised to see him get there at all. And I think Kevin Love gets 29 or 30 minutes in this spot against a pretty vulnerable Brooklyn front court. Where are you at on Larry Nance? We know he's going to be chalk, but he's usually not disappointed in these spots when the rest of the front court is banged up.
Yeah, I mean, I think that especially on FanDuel with the $5,600 price tag there, he comes in as one of my favorite plays on that site. On DraftKings, not as appealing because I think Kevin Love grades out a little bit better there. And also you have, like Dwight Powell at the same price as Larry Nance, who I really, really like. Nance not quite as productive when he's playing alongside Kevin Love either, as we would expect. Love is a good rebounder. He can take some stats away from Nance, but that FanDuel price tag is just too good for me to pass up.
I mentioned in today's deep dive, which you can find on awesemo.com. If you've yet to check us out, please do so. We'd love to have you over there. And if you want to sign up, you want to check it out, you can either sign up for a week. We have weekly passes, which is a pretty cool thing. A lot of people like to utilize that, or more bang for your buck. You get 50% off, half off your first month. All you have to do is use the promo code Deeper Dive. That's in the bottom left side of your screen. Deeper Dive, all one word, will get you 50% off your first month. Just click sign up on the front or the left top side of the homepage, awesemo.com. Select your plan and put in the coupon code Deeper Dive, one word. You get access to everything we have here. The Deeper Dive article that Adam and I switch off, we write every day. Laborious work, painstaking, but it's worth it. The Fantasy Cruncher add-on, the lineup builder, ownership projections, actual projections for all of our sports, everything from Alex Baker, Awesemo himself, Ben Rasa, Josh Engelman. I don't know. I'm forgetting a lot, Adam, but we have a lot. So you can come check it out for yourself. Use the code Deeper Dive, get 50% off your first month, and say hi to us in Slack chat when you do. For premium members, it's a pretty nice tool to have when you want to talk DFS all day like we do as well. All right, Adam. I had mentioned in the deep dive that Kevin Love, to me, is actually one of my favorite tournament plays just because I know that Nance is going to have a lot of ownership. Know that Love is a phenomenal per minute guy. He should get some. Do you have him getting some minutes at center? And if so, how many?
Yeah.
About
Hang on.
13 or so.
Whatever
Nance
doesn't
play. Yeah, so I would think around, I'd say 13 to 15. But either way, it's a good spot. Per minute production's outstanding for Kevin Love this season. 75 on DraftKings to me is not prohibitive whatsoever. What do you make of Kevin Love here?
Yeah, I mean, I really like him, especially on DraftKings at 7,500. On FanDuel, he's just kind of stuck in the same price range with, the Markkanen and Aldridge and Griffin types, but you get a little bit of a discount there on DraftKings off of Griffin and off of Markkanen. So I think that it's a really good spot for him. In this front court against the Nets, very good rebounder, obviously can score, has averaged about 1.4 fantasy points per minute and should play somewhere around, between 28 and 30 minutes. So I'm with you. I like Kevin Love a lot.
Yeah. Not a lot of chatter about him today either, which I found kind of interesting. On FanDuel or DraftKings, about 11% ownership. Not bad. We'll see if that moves up or down as we draw closer to lock. Anything else for you with this Cleveland team?
No.
All right. Let's move on. Another interesting game. I'm pretty fascinated by this one. Atlanta and San Antonio. Spurs 5.5-point road favorites. 235 total. That's right. The highest total on the slate is between the Spurs and the Atlanta Hawks. Obviously we get it. The Hawks are in play, but yeah, the Spurs draw a massive pace-up spot here. And, well, we'll start with them. We'll start with the road team. Adam, you can start wherever you want. You already mentioned Derek White. We've got DeRozan, who seems re-energized since the deadline. You've got Aldridge, who's priced at like 76 on DraftKings. Go ahead.
Yeah, a couple of my favorite plays on the slate. Start with Derek White, who I think he's fine on FanDuel. I believe it's 6,500. 6,700. I think he's fine, but 5,400 on DraftKings. Played 36 minutes last game. I only have him projected for 32 here just because that was the first time we had seen that many minutes out of him. But there's no reason to think that he doesn't, play big minutes going forward. He's been playing really well. It's obviously a great matchup against Atlanta. Alex Len being in and Dwayne Dedmon being out should hurt Atlanta's defense as well, basically all around. Dedmon, a good pick and roll defender, just a better defender than Alex Len across the board. So really like the spot here for San Antonio, but the price tag I think is just too low on White. LaMarcus Aldridge is a phenomenal play to me. He's back to playing, 36 minutes in competitive games, which I expect this one to be. He should be sliding back to center with Jakob Poeltl out, which should make him more productive as well. Again, Dedmon being out, I think is beneficial. So really, really like Aldridge. And then with DeRozan, whatever DeRozan I get to, I'm fine with. I have him behind Aldridge. I have him behind White when you factor in price, but I still think that it's obviously a good spot for DeRozan.
Yeah, so do I. He's really looked a lot better. You take his last 10 games and he's averaging over 41 fantasy points, 28% usage, 26% assists, almost 10% rebounding. I mean, those are good numbers. And they are, look, this might be Atlanta, but they're fighting for playoff positioning as well. Like the Spurs aren't exactly safe. You have the Kings that are sure, they're 3 games back, but it's not like Popovich is going to sit back here. Not to mention that with one win and a loss from the Jazz or Clippers, the Spurs move up to 6th in the West, and you avoid the Warriors. So that's good. Like, they have a lot to play for right now, a lot. I say that, Adam, because I think DeRozan and I think Aldridge continue to play, in close games, upwards of 38 minutes, and that just makes them more appealing at their price points.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think it's the most appealing spot on the slate for me. It's like them and Dallas, I think, are in the 2 most appealing spots.
I agree. Doing today's article and just researching, I came across a lot of analysis where I was really just, the decision-making process came down to, who do I think is going to play more minutes, because so many guys were so closely projected. And this San Antonio team is one where I do expect, of course, unless it gets out of hand, I expect the minutes to be through the roof. And, these are all productive players, whether it be DeRozan or Aldridge or White, who has 16 stocks over his last 5 games. Not bad. Racking up blocks and steals at a high clip, assist, rebounds. He's kind of doing everything, so it mitigates that low usage that you generally don't want to see. Anything else for San Antonio before we talk about the Hawks?
Whatever Rudy Gay I get to, I'm fine with. He's coming off the bench, but I still expect him to play around 28 minutes. So, um, not a priority for me, but small forward's not the best position.
Okay. With Atlanta, Dwayne Dedman's doubtful. I get it. John Collins is expected back, but Lloyd Pierce hasn't exactly been eager to play Collins at the 5. So with no Plumlee and no Amari Spellman, you could go small, I suppose, especially with Pirtle out and Aldridge expected to start at the 5 for San Antonio. But Alex Len, I don't know, man. I think he probably gets a lot of minutes here. He was so bad last game. Shot 0 for 6. And just a brutal performance across 21 minutes. But this seems like a spot, of course, unless Collins is getting like legitimate backup center minutes, and you throw in whoever you want at Poitras or whoever at the 4. I think Len probably gets back to seeing more minutes with Dedman expected out. What are you doing with the front court? How are you viewing it?
So the spot terrifies me since Pirtle's out because Len is just an absolute liability here against Aldridge. But at the same time, it's hard to map out a rotation where Len doesn't get into the mid-20s in minutes because they're just short on bodies.
Right.
So, it's not I'm trying to if it makes sense, I'm trying to under-project him as much as I can. But in doing so, it still makes him a pretty clear play because he's like a point per minute guy who I really can't find a way for him to get less than 24 minutes barring foul trouble or anything like that.
Well, that's the problem I'm having, and again, it's just like how many minutes has Collins played at center this year?
He's been playing a decent amount, not as much lately since Len has been playing more, but there was a stretch where Len was playing like 12 minutes a night and Collins was getting a good amount.
Okay, well that was what Dedman playing around 28, right? That was when Dedman was playing more. So yeah,
I mean you were getting like 8 to 12 minutes from Collins in a lot of games.
Yeah, so I mean it's possible, but and even if he plays 12 and Len say you give 25 to Len, you're still going to need another 10 minutes at center. Look, can Collins play more than that? He can. Yes, Len's a liability, but it's the Hawks. I mean, they're not exactly I don't like to use this analysis often, but I'm not sure Lloyd Pierce is as worried about liabilities in this spot than Popovich might be, or Brett Brown, or whoever might be. I still look. How many minutes are you projecting him for? Because I know you said you're trying to project him down.
Yeah, I have him at 24.
I have him at 26, and at 26, I'm probably going to get a decent amount of. I'm honest. Here's the truth. I'm not as worried about it as you are, and the only reason is that he's still not egregiously expensive for a guy that is a +1 per minute guy. So, if Alex Len plays 20 minutes, it's unusual that he finishes with 9 fantasy points, right? Like Alex Len generally is able to put up, non-killer production even when he doesn't get a lot of runs. So I don't want to use last game or a couple games this season to dictate how I view him tonight. But look, your concerns are well warranted. I'm just not as concerned because he's still really cheap. And on FanDuel, Alex Len is what, 4,100. That's also really inexpensive.
Yeah, I'm still gonna get there. I'm trying not to get like too carried.
You don't want to be there too much. I got you. No, and that makes sense. With the rest of this team, we'll go ahead and talk about it because Trae Young's 8,400 on FanDuel, which I find fascinating, and so does a lot of the field. But because Kyrie's 9,400, Ben Simmons is 9,900, so way more expensive. Whereas on DraftKings, Doncic, Simmons, and Irving are 100, 300, and 500 more than Trae Young. There's not nearly as much of a disparity there as there is on FanDuel.
Yeah, exactly. I think that, and we see it a lot at the center position, but it's the case here at point guard where the pricing's tight on most players. And then you just have like a really weird one here on Trae Young on FanDuel at 8,400. So, even though like the DraftKings scoring sets up better for him, and actually have him projected still a little bit better on DraftKings than I do on FanDuel when, even given the price. When you compare him to the other players, like you said, you don't have on FanDuel, you can't plug in Luka for 300 more or, Ben Simmons, whereas you can on DraftKings. So much more of a FanDuel play for me.
Okay. What else here with Atlanta do you want to talk about, if anything?
Nothing.
All right. Fair enough.
I mean, like, I think $7,000 John Collins is fine, but again, the position is just so deep. Like we talked about, it would really surprise me if Collins is like the highest scorer out of that group. 4,500 for Torian Prince is okay. 4,100 for Herter is okay. Just nothing that you're excited about really outside of Len and then Trae Young on FanDuel.
Yeah, I looked at John Collins earlier, and the only thing about that is, once again, the top and mid range at power forward are ridiculously deep. Hell, if he plays a bunch at the 5, I'd like him more, but I still don't know what Lloyd Pierce is going to do there, and it concerns me a bit. All right. And for Collins, I mean, let's talk about Chicago and Philadelphia. Sixers are one of 4 teams on a back-to-back tonight. The other teams would be Minnesota. We have Philly, Minnesota, the Celtics, and there's one more, and I can't remember who it is, but they're there, I promise. Maybe they aren't. Now I can't even remember. Unimportant. All right, let's get into it, Adam. We've got the Sixers on the road, 4.5-point favorites, 230 total in this game. I guess we can start with the road team. Talk about Simmons averaging 50 fantasy points per game in 6 games since Embiid went down, averaging a triple-double over his last 3 games. Solid usage, assisting, rebounding. Everything looks great. And another thing, I don't know if anyone's noticed this. I certainly have. He has changed his release on his free throws, and he's added more arc to his shot. He is 9 for 11 from the free throw line over his last 2 games and has looked a lot more comfortable there. So while it may not seem like much, those extra 3, 4, 5 points sometimes on free throws are meaningful when you're paying a decent price tag for him. So let's talk about this team, Adam, and we'll include everybody here and prioritize them, or maybe we don't like them at all.
Yeah, I mean, the minutes have really been there too. You're at 3 straight games now with at least 40 minutes for Ben Simmons.
Yeah, that's crazy. All in regulation too.
Yeah. 23.5% usage, almost 14% rebounding percentage, almost a 31% assist percentage since the Tobias Harris trade without Joel Embiid on the floor. Obviously a nice matchup against Chicago here. So I like him, especially the $8,900 price tag with small forward eligibility on DraftKings is really nice. You have Jimmy Butler, who was awful last night and really just hasn't been playing well lately. But Josh and I talked about it this morning. Tobias Harris has been shooting the lights out since coming to Philadelphia, much better than he was, with the Clippers this year and much better than he was last year. It's been the opposite for Jimmy Butler. If you look at his numbers since Harris came without Embiid on the floor, his true shooting percentage is much lower than his season-long averages. So I expect that Butler will rebound, and at 7,300 on DraftKings, I'm going to just keep going back there until it happens.
All right. Yeah, fair enough. Oh, God.
Kyrie.
Oh, God. Well, there you have it, friends. It's been a fun show. We'll see you back here tomorrow on the Deeper Dive. Fuck me. Hey, at least
we haven't done that game yet.
I know, and at least it's only 5:30. Like this could be worse. Kyrie Irving's out, so there's that. And Kyrie Irving's out, so yeah. Irving, by the way, had a great game last night. Didn't play in the fourth quarter. He was going to play like 40 minutes in that game if it didn't blow out. Terry Rose. Well, screw it. We'll give you that news, let you make some adjustments while you're watching the show, and we'll get there momentarily. But before we do, we got a few games to get to first, Adam. And with Philly, you said, Jimmy Butler, you think he's going to bounce back. Fair enough. I'll tell you what, though. The usage has been very strange. Like, he's going the entire first quarter of games taking 1 or no shots. It's crazy. The second half is where he becomes more aggressive. They brought him on to be, second half guy, and he's been pretty impactful. He's been pretty effective in those spots. I don't know. With Butler, do I want to take the savings on Butler, let's say, over He said, "LL Cool Jeff, Kyrie is out every fifth time Laffy writes the deep dive." That's so true, and it's always, of course, after I write it. It's so
Right.
true, Jeff. I'm sure Adams had it happen as well, but with Butler, we got to saying it. Do you like Butler or Levine better at basically the same price on DraftKings?
Butler.
You do? Okay.
Yeah.
On FanDuel, you like Butler or Booker? Butler or Booker better?
Hang on.
Butler's 84, Booker's 86.
Yeah,
Against
I don't remember how much I liked Booker. And of course it's not loading. Probably Booker.
Okay. So yeah, I guess for me, Butler's in that tier where it's a little bit more difficult for me to get there. And man, Simmons and Harris have just been doing so much damage. There will be that game where Butler gets it done, right? Like yesterday, right after we said Redick has been so incredibly ineffective. Yeah. But here's the thing, like, this is why I'm still never super worried about fading Redick. He had 26 real points and 35 fantasy points. You're happy with that. Right. Don't get me wrong. But the nail's not in the coffin. If you fade Redick, because he had 5 assists, 5 rebounds, 0 assists, 0 blocks, and 0 steals. You know, Redick needs to score like 20 plus points to get you where you need him to go. Again, Redick to me, tertiary play, he's fine. I don't really see myself having a ton. Eric Gordon, the same thing yesterday. And that's by the way, I ended up with some because of the Schroeder and Paul news, and I didn't really have any legitimate swaps. That sucked, but he was as bad as I thought he'd be. What do you have outside of Butler and Simmons? We still have Harris, and Jonah Bolden's back, but his price has come up, even though he didn't play last night. And then Redick, of course, as well.
Yeah, I mean, I still think the price tag on Redick on DraftKings is pretty nice. It's not a huge priority. Like he was way more popular than I thought he would be yesterday.
Time, yeah.
I actually ended up with more for him than I thought I was going to. But I know in some of the high stake stuff, he was like 50% owned, which I think is just a mistake. He's at a 20% usage rate since the trade without Embiid on the floor. And it makes sense because you just have one more, scorer out there with Harris. So I think that he's too cheap in this matchup. It's just that it's not some, like slam dunk play.
Right. Yeah. And then, I talked about, again, Bolden, but yesterday I would have been a lot more into it if he hadn't seen his price come up. And also, I'm not saying Patton plays tonight, but the 9 minutes he got yesterday, if he sees even 6 minutes today, then Bolden runs the risk of losing maybe 4 additional minutes, and you need all you can get out of him. Also, Amir Johnson actually played admirably yesterday, and I played some. I said if I can get 20 minutes from Amir Johnson, I'll take it at the dead min. Sometimes you just have to roll the dice, and he's been a pretty good per minute guy this year. That said, none of these front court players am I getting with much frequency at all for Philly tonight, Adam.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you, especially now that a bunch of stuff just opened up on Boston.
Right, yeah, and now that Bolden's back as well. I mean, that obviously makes a big difference. It gets crowded, even with Embiid and Boban out. All right, Chicago. You have Levine on DraftKings at 7,500, 8K on FanDuel. Since the deadline, since they brought Porter in, he's still right around almost 30% usage. So he hasn't been bad. 1.17 fantasy points per minute. Obviously losing assist work and all of that good stuff, but not terrible, and his price is down. Marking an 8K flat on DraftKings. On DraftKings, it's worth noting that he is $600 less expensive than Blake Griffin, and on FanDuel, he's $300 more expensive than Blake Griffin, Adam.
Yeah, Markkanen's coming in as one of my top plays on the slate. I don't know why his price tag dropped on DraftKings, but it did. And it's not a bad spot here against Philly. Since the Bulls traded Portis and Parker to the Wizards, a 19.5% rebounding percentage and almost a 27% usage rate for Lauri Markkanen. He's just been playing really, really well. Gets 35 plus minutes in competitive games. It's still like it's tough for me to feel confident in him just because he's young and we're not used to paying these price tags for him. But, if you just look at the numbers, there's no reason for me not to have a lot of Lauri Markkanen here.
Yeah, I know. Me too. Plus, he has a distinct size advantage against this Philly front court. whether he's around the basket or whether he just has, ample opportunity to get space and no hands in his face on 3-point shots. I like that. I'm going to ask you about a guy, and you'll probably laugh, but I have to do it anyway. Robin Lopez, since the trade deadline, is averaging 1 fantasy point per minute, 21% usage, and 10% rebounding. So the rebounding not great, but 21% usage and a fantasy point per minute. In competitive games, he's playing a lot of minutes. 34, 40, 31. I mean, against this Philly front court, is it crazy to think that Lopez could have a good game tonight? I don't think it is. Now, you also have the second part of the equation of, is he worth rostering over a Len or over some of these other cheaper centers like a Dwight Powell, of course. But I do want to talk about Robin Lopez because he has quietly been very good lately and is quietly playing a lot of minutes as well.
Yeah, I mean, the minutes have been there for sure. The production's been there. The problem for me is just that the price tags come up a bit. He's more expensive not only than Len and McGee, but even Jared Allen, who is obviously risky, but he's another guy that comes with upside in the price range. So it's tough for me to get to Lopez. I have him projected for like 27 DraftKings points, which is a pretty decent projection. It's just that I think it'll be tough for me to actually get him in the lineups.
Yeah, and look, I don't disagree with that. I will say this much, though. I actually like Lopez over Jared Allen. That's my own personal opinion on this, against Bolden and company. Obviously, Vooch didn't prove us right yesterday against Amir and Scott and Patton, but that's one game, and I still think it's pretty favorable here. So I actually don't hate Robin Lopez. I don't. If he plays, 33 minutes, then you're probably going to get some good numbers from him. Isn't it funny that this guy was about to be bought out at the deadline and now he's playing 33 minutes per game?
Now they're talking about possibly bringing him back next year.
I know. You're going to sign a 6-year extension.
Right.
Anything else for the Bulls?
I like Otto Porter too.
Okay.
6,300 on DraftKings is pretty appealing. 7,400 on FanDuel, not as appealing, but the position's not good. I think it's a perfectly fine matchup for him. I think that, again, the minutes are there, around 35, 36 in competitive games. So I like Porter.
All right. Let's keep it moving here. We got some games to get to, and we're making decent time, so we're going to be able to get through all of these, of course. Utah and New Orleans. I know. Well, let me give you the odds on this one. The New Orleans Pelicans at home are 4.5-point dogs, 230 total. This is a home and home series. The Pelicans actually came back and beat New Orleans last game. I got some fourth quarter, live action betting on that, and I got real nervous because I had Utah. It was like late in the fourth quarter, and they were like plus 5.5. I took them at plus 5.5, which they ended up losing by 3, but I also took them. I think I put a little bit on them to win outright, and they tied it up and actually took the lead with like 30 seconds left. And of course, Julius Randle's a stud, and they ended up losing that game. But Pelicans, here's the point I'm making here, Adam. The Pelicans are getting really bad lines every night, because of the whole Davis thing and whatever. They're not playing. They might be playing their best basketball of the season. So I'm not looking at this as a pushover team that's rolled over and died at all. I think this game stays competitive, and I think we need to look at it that way. By the way, not sure if you saw my tweet on this or any of the game. Anthony Davis' only action in the fourth quarter was when Gentry brought him in to guard an inbound against Ricky Rubio with a second left in the fourth quarter. That's what this has devolved into in New Orleans.
Yeah, it's a mess. I agree with you that they're playing well. I don't expect this game to blow out. I'm not getting to really anything from New Orleans because like Julius Randle would be my favorite play, but we've talked about how many good power forward options there are. Drew Holiday, I think, is fine, but again, you have Donovan Mitchell on the other side here. You have D'Angelo Russell, you have Beal, you have Kemba, you have Luka, you have all these guards that you can go to. Elfrid Payton, I think, is the guy that I'm most likely to get to, but my exposure to him, I'm sure, just plummeted with the Kyrie Irving news. So, not a whole lot from the New Orleans side that really appeals to me.
Yeah, and I should have pointed that out. I expect it to be close, but it doesn't mean that I love them as a team. By the way, can we just kind of admire how ridiculously consistent Drew Holiday's been? Like, you want 44 to 48 fantasy points every night, just go to Drew. You know, he's basically locked into that. Any more or less is an oddity. And then Randall's been very solid as well. The problem is Randall he's not that cheap, right? I think he's fine, but it's not like you're getting a big discount on him. He is playing a lot of minutes with Davis off the floor, a considerable amount of minutes, which is nice. I have to ask you about it. Anthony Davis, 6,700 on DraftKings.
No, and the reasoning, I talked about it on the pod. I talked about it this morning with Josh. The reasoning is, sure, he can be really productive. But if he's going to play 21 or 22 minutes, let's just say he gets 2 fantasy points per minute, which is more than he's going to average.
Right, it's still 44.
Let's say he gets 2 Right, it's 44. And that's good for his price tag, sure. Right. But it's very unlikely that is like the highest score, or that at the end of the night, you're like, oh, Anthony Davis won me this tournament with his 44 points. And he clearly, like when you project him, it's going to be below that. So it's still just no reason for me to go there, especially on a 10-game slate.
Yeah, I agree. I'll take the extra 9 or so minutes from Kevin Love and pay a little bit more. I don't have an issue with that, especially being that Love isn't projected to be that high owned either. Utah side, I know you and I were kind of on different pages with Mitchell last game. He did get up 24 shots. I just had trouble getting there, and I have trouble getting there at 8,700 on DraftKings and 9,100 on FanDuel. Once again, the shooting guard position has so much to where I'm like, I can go elsewhere and feel okay about it. Go ahead and break down the Utah Jazz for us.
No, I agree with you. I ended up with less Mitchell after the show last time than I had on it, because I think I bumped someone or something, and it kind of took away more Mitchell than I intended. But it's kind of the same thing here. There are just so many guys around him. I like him more than Drew. I like him a little bit more than Levine, even factoring in price. But it's still tough to really prioritize him, in part because he's just so close in price to Luka Doncic, who I absolutely love. So, I'm happy with any Mitchell I get. I'm happy with any Rudy Gobert I get, because it's a good spot for Gobert. But again, $900 more for Andre Drummond on DraftKings is pretty appealing. Gobert's priced up on FanDuel, so it's tough to get there. And then you have Rubio, who I think is perfectly fine. But now you have Terry Rozier added to the mix, where you already had Derek White, who I like a little bit more than Rubio. You have Rajon Rondo at the same price point. So there are several good plays on Utah, but I'd be surprised if I actually end up with a lot of them.
Agreed. I actually think you can make the argument that there's several pretty decent plays on the Pelicans too, but once again, better plays elsewhere. And that's where I'm coming to. Now, look, the reason we say that a lot is because we're not really helping or doing much if we're, just saying everybody's in play, because after the show you end up, with 100 players and, oh, well, they liked them, and them. If we're not prioritizing them, and putting one ahead of the other, it's not really doing anybody any good. But again, you end up with these guys, you're not feeling terrible about it. If you're hand building 1, 2, 3 lineups, I think that's where it comes into not prioritizing them as much. All right.
Yeah, the guys that I say that about, it's basically saying, if you're watching and you feel stronger about, I really like Gobert, but if for whatever reason, if you have reasons that you think he's the best center, I wouldn't argue with you too hard. It's just that he's, in my rankings, I like him, but I just don't like him as much as some other guys.
Right. That's all. Yeah, and Gobert at 8,100 is still a very good. What's that?
Maxi's unlikely to play.
Yeah, I saw that. So you get 20 minutes going somewhere.
Yeah, so it solidifies Powell. You'd probably kick a couple minutes to Dirk. Mejri probably plays some more. Maybe Finney-Smith.
I don't think it has a huge impact. It'll help. Those guys that you just mentioned. Alex Len is
confirmed starting.
Sorry.
I said Len confirmed starting.
Yeah, that's what I was going at there. And John Collins, here's a big one. This is big. You know where I'm going. John Collins is limited to 25 minutes. So
yeah.
So unless you see Poitras playing bigger minutes, it's unlikely that Collins gets a lot of minutes at the 5. Once again, this means that as much as I don't want to, I am going to bump Alex Len's minutes a little bit here. I think it only makes sense. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. but I do expect Alex Len to play a decent amount of minutes if Collins is only going to play 25.
Yep.
All right. And maybe people are scared off of him. I doubt it, but that'd be cool. Phoenix in New York. Phoenix Suns 3.5-point favorites, 226 total. I told you I don't mind going back to the well with Booker. He hasn't been explosive lately, but he still can be. He's still right around 30% usage, 30% assists since Oubre came into the starting lineup and since the trade deadline when they added Tyler Johnson. I'm really not too worried about Booker. I'll let you talk Phoenix here because for me it's Booker and then maybe small amounts of Oubre and Miles Bridges because he's cheap.
It's another spot where I like several players on Phoenix, but I just don't like them as much as some other plays on the slate. Booker is one of those guys. I'm happy with any Devin Booker that I get, but I don't think I'll have massive amounts of him because there are so many plays, similarly priced plays that I like. DeAndre Ayton, I think, is a perfectly fine play. Should get 32, 33 minutes here. Reasonable price tag, but there's value at center, and then there's also Rudy Gobert, Andre Drummond, Nikola Jokic, Towns. Just a really tough position to prioritize Ayton at. Kelly Oubre, I think's fine, but there are still forwards that I like more. And then Bridges, we've gotten enough value now where it's kind of tough for me. I mean, you have cheaper guys like Dirk and Kaminsky that you can take a chance on, but then even from like Boston, you have guys that are priced similarly to Bridges, like Hayward, like Jaylen Brown, like Marcus Smart, that now get a boost without Kyrie. So it's tough for me to really prioritize anyone.
Yeah, I agree. Look, I like Booker a little more than you. Booker was my pivot from Mitchell the other day, and I'm not going to act like it ended beautifully. I think he had 40 fantasy points. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't spectacular. I just still know that he's a 30-30 guy, 30% usage, 30% assist rate, playing big minutes. And at a good price point, he continues to go overlooked from a ownership standpoint as well. Right now we have Devin Booker projected at, let me just pull this up here, at 11%. That's really not much. So I do like him. On the other side, when it comes to New York, I'm just going to let you, we have two games that I really want to get to, so I'll let you do this. I don't like the Knicks tonight, and I don't really find, especially with Jordan starting, I don't really have much interest even against Phoenix. Maybe you can sway my opinion on someone.
The only thing I would throw out is Damian Dotson's $4,300 on FanDuel at shooting guard. Still playing around 30 minutes, has a 20% usage rate since the trade deadline when they got rid of whoever they got rid of, Hardaway. So I think Dotson's a good play, especially on FanDuel. And 5,800 actually for DeAndre Jordan on FanDuel isn't crazy when you factor in the center pricing, but it's still not a priority. In general, though, it's just I don't see the need to guess on which one of these not very good basketball players on the Knicks is going to get minutes on a 10-game slate with a lot of really good plays.
Yeah, exactly. That's where I'm at as well. I like the matchup a lot more for Phoenix, and you don't really need to roll the dice on the Knicks. All right, 2 to go here. Sacramento and Boston. Kings 3.5. Well, actually, let's see the updated here since the Irving news, because that will certainly influence it. The Kings are now 2-point dogs. Look at that. Irving moving the line 1.5. 228 total. Came down from 230. Do you like anything from the Kings here? You like Hield?
I don't mind Hield. Hield and Bogdanovich are the two that I like the most, especially on DraftKings. You have 5,700 for Bogdanovich. You have 72 for Hield. You should get around 36 minutes from Bogdanovich, around 34 from Hield. Hield with a 29% usage rate since the start of February. Pretty impressive. But, again, tough to really prioritize either of these guys in a difficult matchup against Boston.
Yeah, I'm with you. I thought I'd have more interest in this game. Now, I will say I did like Irving a lot.
Yep.
Obviously, like Doncic at a basically an almost identical price point, but I did like Irving a lot. And he didn't play 40 minutes in a back-to-back. He played 30 because of the blowout, and played really well at that. So he's gone. You now have Terry Rozier at 5,100 on DraftKings. On FanDuel, Rozier weighs in at 6,500. Let's talk about him, and then we'll speed through the rest of this team and talk a little Gordon Hayward. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, Rozier's played 340 minutes alongside Al Horford without Kyrie this season. Averaged about 0.9 fantasy points per minute, which is obviously reasonable. I expect around 32 minutes from him. 5,100 on DraftKings, really nice. 65 on FanDuel is okay, but much less appealing, I think, especially because I expect that people will kind of just flock to him because of the Kyrie news. So a better play for me on DraftKings than FanDuel for Rozier.
Yeah, for sure. People love the shiny new toy, the flavor of the week, and okay, do you like Rozier or Derek White more on FanDuel?
Derek White.
Rozier or Spencer Dinwiddie? Rozier 65, Dinwiddie 63.
Rozier.
All right, and then Rozier or Jeff Teague at 63.
Rozier.
All right, last one. Rozier or Satoransky at 59.
Satoransky.
Okay, so you have Rozier right in the middle of that tier, basically.
Yeah.
All right. Gordon Hayward erupted yesterday after literally being he was without a pulse for 5 previous games. 77 total fantasy points in 5 previous games. 30 real points last game, 51 fantasy points. He's 3,900 on DraftKings. On FanDuel, he is 4,500. Look, the truth be told, as much as I dislike Gordon Hayward, I already had some of him earlier. There's no way I'm getting away from him without Irving here, chalk or not. He's just too cheap. There's nothing more to it.
Yeah, I mean, it sucks, but he's averaged a fantasy point per minute without Kyrie on the floor this year. 805 minutes, 20.5% usage rate, almost a 25% assist percentage, 0.98 DraftKings points per minute. Should play somewhere in the 25 to 26 minute range, and his price tag's just so low that even if he hits that average, you're fine with it. And he clearly has the upside for more in a pace-off spot against the Kings.
All right, burn through the rest of this team for me quickly, please.
Marcus Smart, I think, is really interesting. If you go back and look at the last game that Kyrie sat, Brad Wanamaker played about 8 minutes. And so you got some backup point for Marcus Smart. I think that's interesting. You probably pick up a couple more minutes from Smart as well. So kind of, interesting there. You can also look I think the obvious pivot to Hayward would be going to Jaylen Brown, who, I think he's a fine play as well, but I think is probably just a lot lower owned than Hayward.
Anything on Horford?
Yeah, he's another good center play.
All right. Second of a back-to-back. Baines is healthy too, so I don't know what that does, but he's
limited though.
Yeah, he's limited. Just throwing it out there. All right. Let's close it out. Lakers in Denver. Lakers 5.5 point dogs at home, 230.5 total. They were embarrassed at the Staples Center on their home court against another team, the Clippers, that play on that same court. And it was a must-win game for them. It was, no question. They lost. They got embarrassed. And James didn't rule out the possibility of playing less minutes going forward. I'm just not really on LeBron James. I love the 8 and 9K range players today across the board. I love Jokic on the other side of this game. LeBron's 12-7 on FanDuel, and I still don't think it's all that great. Rondo, I still like. Obviously still like Rajon Rondo. And then JaVale McGee, I think this could be a game where JaVale gets decent minutes. Chandler's out for whatever that's worth. If JaVale McGee gets 20 minutes, it won't be terrible. Now, Len, with Collins limited, Len becomes more appealing to me, but that's where I'm at on the Lakers, Adam.
Yeah, I'm with you on LeBron. I think that so at 11-3 on DraftKings, I think it's much better than the 12-7 on FanDuel. The problem, though, is just when you look at, all the other options, you mentioned Jokic as a guy to spend up on in this game, but, where James is affordable on DraftKings, if you look at, other small forward options, he's 1,200 more than Luka. He's, like 3K more than DeRozan. It still just gets really tough to prioritize him. I love Rondo on DraftKings, less so on FanDuel. JaVale McGee on either site. We know the risk that he comes with because, we saw it last game. He played 13 minutes even without Chandler. But Kuzma being out should help to solidify his minutes as well. They're playing a big front court in Denver. And then also, I think worth pointing out, Josh Hart at 3,300 on DraftKings. with Kuzma out, I expect around 30 minutes for Hart. If Ingram, who is questionable, sits, then you could see like 36, 37 from Hart, especially if Stevenson's out also. Like there's the potential for Hart to just play like this entire game.
Yeah, there is, for sure. If Ingram's out, that's definitely going to make a big impact. Yeah, just not huge on LeBron. I do think McGee's minutes could be significant here, meaning 20, 22. We'll see. We got to close it out here, Adam. Denver. Jokic is one of my favorite plays tonight. Floor is yours. Take us away.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how much Jokic actually get to just because of the position, but I do love him. Like he's the guy that I want to pay up for. There's just nothing to dislike about him in this spot against the Lakers. We know, how good he is on a per minute basis. He does everything. Behind him, though, it gets kind of tough because Denver just has so many guys in their rotation right now. I think the price tag on both sites for Will Barton is pretty appealing. I expect around 32 minutes out of him against a Lakers defense that's really struggling. Any Jamal Murray I get to is fine, but there's all those point guards we've talked about that are less expensive than him. So Jokic is like the priority for me from Denver, and then whatever I get of Barton or Murray, I'm fine with.
That's exactly where I'm at. Aside from that, I'm not turning to Millsap or anybody else here. And on the other side, you have Rondo, McGee, just to get that clear. And if Ingram is out, that could change a lot. As you mentioned, Hart would probably play like 35 minutes. By the way, Live Before Lock coming up next. And before you head out, hit us with a thumbs up, like the video. It does a lot for us, and we really appreciate all of you guys that support the show. Subscribe and hit the notification bell as well, so you always know when new content's dropping. Rondo, you'd be surprised. He sees a big usage bump and a nice per minute bump with Ingram off the floor. Also, 8% assist bump. So that helps Rondo. Keep it in mind. Live Before Lock coming up next. They're taking you up till 7 p.m. Eastern. Good luck tonight, friends. Thanks as always for watching. Adam and I will catch you back here on the next Deeper Dive.